How does someone actually retire at the age of 33? You know, we hear about these early retirees, and you kind of wonder, is there some sort of gimmick involved? Where did they inherit a lot of money? Did they win the lottery? Or are they just living a life that none of us would really want to live? A life just devoid of many resources, a good place to live, some of the basic necessities in life? Are they living such a frugal life that they've made the kinds of sacrifices that 99% of us would never want to make? My name is Rob Berger. I'm the founder of DoughRoller.net and the host of this podcast. Today we're going to talk to someone who in fact did retire at the age of 33. They didn't inherit their money. They didn't win the lottery. And while they are certainly good with their money, they live a lifestyle any of us could be happy with.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. So on today's show, I have Justin. Justin is the blogger behind the blog rootofgood.com. You know, the money is the root of all evil, kind of a play on that, rootofgood.com. And he retired at the age of 33. And I was thrilled to have him on the show. I was glad he had the time to do it. Of course, he's retired, so why doesn't he have the time? Although he's a husband and a father, so he's still got his hands full. But at 33, he retired, and I kind of wanted to know how he did it. You know, we talked to Mr. Money Mustache eons ago. I think that was podcast number 7, so that was 2013. We talked to Mr. Money Mustache, and I wanted to get a different perspective, someone else that also retired at a very, very young age, and find out how they did it, and how we could perhaps learn from what in this case Justin has accomplished. So I want to get right to the interview. After the interview, I'll have just a few minutes of sort of my own commentary about what Justin had to say. Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rob. Glad to be here.
Well, I am thrilled that you could join us. I found your blog, as I think I mentioned to you in an email, Root of Good, rootofgood.com. Where in the world does that name come from?
Well, it's sort of taking that old classic saying, depending on who you talk to, but money is the root of all evil. I just sort of took it and put it on its head and said money is the root of all good. And I know the actual quote is the love of money is the root of all evil, but it's been popularized to the point where people say, well, money is evil, money is bad. That, you know, it causes all these hardships, and the reality is, I think it actually frees you up. It lets you do what you want to do. It lets you help other people like you want to. It takes away a lot of the constraints that you have in life. And I mean, when you get down to it, if everyone is pursuing money and it's really just a medium of exchange that helps you buy other things like food and shelter for yourself and your family and your kids, it's just bizarre to call that evil. So that's where the name came from.
Okay, I like that. Well, we're going to talk obviously about early retirement. You retired at age 33. But before we kind of dive into the nuts and bolts of how you did that and how it's going for you, why don't you just tell folks as much or as little about who you are as you'd like?
Okay, sure. So as you mentioned, I retired at 33. I've been retired about 18 months now. I'm 34 now. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is in the Triangle area, sometimes called Raleigh-Durham. So it's a somewhat modest cost of living area, not the lowest in the nation, but nowhere near some of the higher cost areas. So that sort of played into our ability to retire early, a lower fixed cost structure for pretty much everything housing related. I worked as an engineer in the public and the private sector for almost 10 years before pulling the plug. I have an engineering degree and actually went to law school. And
you poor thing.
Yeah, I went to law school and I figured out I did not want to practice law during some of my summer internships. So
you're smarter than I am. It took me 25 years to figure that out.
Yeah, so I had a good backup plan. Practice engineering, and it sort of boiled down to I just like the engineering better, and that the mathematical analytical part of my brain works better than the legal side. It seemed like there was a lot more gray areas that were arguably one way or the other, and so I just felt more comfortable doing engineering, and it was easier to find a 40-hour per week job in engineering than it was in law, and the money was not quite as good, but good enough. So it worked out well for me, and I think I went into it knowing I'm not going to be working forever. I thought I'd probably have to work about 20 years from the time I left college, but it just worked out where I didn't have to work quite that long. So. And
did you complete your law degree?
Yeah, I went ahead and finished it up, and actually during the Great Recession back in '09, I was in an engineering field that was very closely tied to real estate, so I had a backup plan at that point in '09. I went back and passed the bar exam and got my law license to practice, just in case everything went crazy. I could always do traffic tickets and write wills for people, and so. Yeah, and it would pay the bills. I mean, I just back in '09, it was, the world was in a certain place, so that was my backup plan, was to practice law on the side.
So you're married?
Yeah, married.
How long have you been married?
You're
supposed to know this answer.
Almost 11 years. Almost 11 years.
It's funny. I remember the numbers more than my wife does. It's usually the guy, I think, that's supposed to forget. But 11 years, okay, that's good.
We're the same way. She's made the mistake before of saying, we've been married for a year, and it was actually 3 years.
Right.
So I can't take any slack for that.
Right. And do you have any children?
Yep, we have 3 children, ages 2, 8, and 9.
Wow. Well, good for you. And you're retired. You're 34 now. You retired at 33. So what I'd like to do, and I think would be helpful to those listening to the show, is sort of deconstruct how in the world you did this, and then talk about what it's like now that you've done it. So let's kind of go back to whatever the beginning is. When did you decide, I might want to take a different approach, an approach that most people don't take, and try to retire early?
Sure. I always had an idea that it's possible. I mean, it's dating back to even high school. And back in high school, my idea was more of like, hey, if I can make $800 a month, I can share a 3-bedroom apartment, pay $200 a month, and I can bum rides from people, or maybe have a car and put groceries on the table for $800 a month. And so I was like, well, it wouldn't take that much to get it, and interest is like 5% on an investment account. So I did some calculations, and I was like, well, it won't take that much to save up and do it. And I mean, I realize in hindsight that's obviously a very, very naive approach to how to construct a good early retirement plan that lasts 50 years. So I finished college, and then I got out, started working, and just didn't need to spend all the money I was making. It wasn't a ridiculous amount of money. I started out at less than $50,000 a year in engineering, and just started maxing out 401k and an IRA just from the start. And that was even before my wife started working, when she was still in school and giving birth to our first child. So we started out living on less than one salary from the get-go, and didn't really increase our lifestyles that much, other than having 3 kids will obviously increase the costs for lots of things, but we kept those increases pretty moderate, and I think we found ways to save money as we got older. Just we got a little bit wiser as to where to spend money and how to spend money and how to economize in different areas. I'm not an extreme early retiree, frugal kind of type, but I do a lot of DIY fixes on my house, and I kind of try to do it on my car, and so we don't spend a lot of money, and we've saved very, very hardcore our entire working careers, and a lot of that was in tax deferred accounts, so we saved a lot on taxes as well.
So when you graduated, what year did you graduate from college?
Graduated law school in 2004.
Okay.
2004.
So you didn't really start working until then. Yeah,
I had pretty good paying summer jobs in engineering and in law, and even I had small jobs before in high school, but yeah, the real full-time permanent high paying job started in 2004.
Okay. And at that point, did you have any school loans?
Yeah. I had law school loans.
How much? How much were those?
We actually both went to law school, and they started out, I think, around 55,000 each.
Wow. So you've obviously paid those off.
We've paid down a good chunk of them, and we still have them. Um, we've been on the income based repayment plan for, I don't know, probably 5 years now.
Ah.
And which actually reduced our payments because our income never was really, really high. So we're still on that income-based repayment plan, and I'm not sure what the payments are going to be long term, but because we have 3 kids, the income-based repayment calculations means our payments are very low. So, and our interest rate is less than 1% on those loans, so we're not in any hurry to pay them
Wow.
off.
And so what's going to happen? What's your payment going to? So your wife still works at the moment? Is that right?
Yeah, as of today, yes. I'm not sure what her last day is going to be, but it's coming up probably very, very soon.
Okay. So how will they calculate your payments when you're both retired?
It's based on your adjusted. Well, don't quote me on this exactly, but it's roughly your adjusted gross income. There may be some adjustments further to that, but basically they look at adjusted gross income, and just because of the way our financial accounts are structured, that adjusted gross income is very, very manageable from year to year, and probably in most years, while all our kids are still in the house, our payments will be around zero or very close. I think this year they're going to be $40 a month, maybe, and that's down from around $300 a month when we're working. So that's there's a big decrease because of our adjusted gross income being lower. But there may be years where we have higher incomes where we pay $500 a month or more. So it's sort of I look at it. I mean, mathematically, to me, it's just about a 15% tax rate on our income above a certain amount. So.
Okay. Well, so when you graduated law school, were you married?
No, we got married right after. No, actually, we got married in the last year when I was in law school, the very last year. Yeah.
All right. And so you have some school loans. What I'm trying to get at is, the practical side of being able to save as much as you did. I mean, for example, what kind of car did you drive?
We still drive the cars that we bought back in undergraduate school. Actually, we both bought. I bought a Honda Civic. My wife bought a Honda Accord. We financed both of them at a pretty low rate, but we paid them off, and we've been driving them for 15 years now. Okay. And so I actually don't drive a whole lot these days anymore, just because we live in the city and it's fairly walkable. But that's one aspect of not increasing the lifestyle a whole lot. We basically just kept the cars that we have had all along that are relatively modest. I guess economy cars. They're sedans. Even with 3 kids, we have. As hard as it is to believe for some people, you can actually fit 3 kids and 2 adults in a Honda Civic.
All right. So you maxed out your 401k. Your wife maxed her 401k out. Is that pretty much every year once you started working?
As far as I remember, I mean, we've always maxed them out, and we usually would have a little extra space above that to save in our taxable accounts.
Would you also? I know you had a 457 at one time, right?
Yeah, I worked for the state for almost 3 years, and we actually had a 401k and a 457 plan there. And it's I don't think that's a real widely known fact, but you can actually contribute the maximum amount to both of those. So it was 17,500 in 2014 or in 2013, 2014. I think it's 18,000 now. So you could put $36,000 a year total into a 457 and a 401k. So if you're a state employee, check that out. If you want to have an extra $18,000 deduction, it could be sitting there waiting for you and you don't know about it.
All right. Now, and that's something I've never worked for the state government or any government for that matter, so it wasn't something I was familiar with. But obviously a huge way to shelter a lot of money from taxes. Did you guys use IRAs?
Yeah, we used IRAs. Most years we qualified for the traditional IRA deduction. So we actually would typically contribute to the traditional IRAs when we could. There were a few years where our adjusted gross income was too high to contribute to traditional IRAs, so we put money in Roths for a few years.
So when you add all this up, I mean, I know I assume it changed a bit over the roughly 10 years that you worked, I guess. But how much were you saving each year?
Well, starting out, probably a 401k and an IRA, and maybe some on top of that. Probably like 20,000 or so, maybe 23,000 on a $50,000 income.
So that's for each of you.
That was starting out, yeah, and then once my wife got a job as well,
Okay.
it climbed. We were saving probably 50,000 a year, and I think the last year before I quit working, we were saving probably $80,000, $90,000 a year out of $140,000 earned income, roughly.
Wow. And again, most of that savings was in retirement accounts, but some of it was in taxable.
Yeah, almost all of it was in retirement accounts, but yeah, some was in taxable accounts. And just to give a breakdown roughly of where we are, I haven't checked lately. I guess, yeah, I think I checked on Friday, and I think we have about 1.4 million in investments, and it's roughly 300,000, 350,000 in taxable accounts, about 900,000 in tax-deferred retirement accounts like a 401k or traditional IRA, and then less than 100,000 in Roth accounts.
Okay. So what's your philosophy on investing? How have you put this money to work?
Sure. I started out right out of college not really knowing a whole lot about investments. I mean, I grew up in a house where my dad watched the nightly business report just about every night. So I knew I've heard of stocks before, and I kind of knew what the stock market was and trading and how companies roughly work. And then law school helped me figure out what companies are in terms of the legal entity and that they're shareholders, and that's what you're buying. You're buying a small piece of a business when you buy a share of stock. But I actually started out investing with Edward Jones, just not knowing any better. That was who my family had used before, and quickly realized that there was a much better way to save and invest for almost no fees. And so I switched to Vanguard very quickly after I started working and seeing those huge sales charges that Edward Jones add up. So I've been with Vanguard and have an account at Fidelity as well, just because of my wife's her job is regulated by FINRA, so she has to hold an account at Fidelity. Mm-hmm. But if you look at my holdings, they are all index funds, very low cost, almost all Admiral funds at Vanguard. My expense ratio is 0.17%. There are a few funds like the International Value Fund there's not a great index fund alternative, so I have an actively managed fund at Vanguard for that.
What? An actively managed mutual fund?
Yeah, I mean, I would, if there was a great index option, I would probably go for it.
I'm just goofing you.
But yeah, I mean, those fees add up, and there are some low fee actively managed funds that are pretty good.
Yeah.
But I've just, when I'm faced with an alternative of 0.0 something percent expense ratio versus 0.4, 0.5%, I would take the lower one.
So what's your stock to bond allocation?
Almost 100% stocks. And that's pretty well thought out. We only spend somewhere around 2.5 to 3% of our portfolio balance each year, which is roughly covered by the dividend yield. And we keep about, I think we have about 2 years worth of cash on hand right now. And that fluctuates some just depending on what we're doing, spending wise and investing wise. But so we have about a 2-year cash buffer, which is probably about 3% of our portfolio. And plus the dividends in the taxable account, they come in as well each year. And so we could basically go 2 years without selling anything. So if the market crashes, we'll be living off of our cash and hoping it recovers within a couple of years. Otherwise, we'll end up selling in a down market.
Well, you've always got your dividends too.
Yeah, and that's what. Yeah, I mean, the dividends plus the cash we have on hand will last us about 2 years, and that's we start looking at it and we're like, well, okay, we'll be fine today and tomorrow and next year, and then starting in year 3, we'll have to make a decision: are we going to try to cut spending even more? Are we going to try to somebody find a part-time job? Are we going to just sell our investments when they're down? So I'm pretty flexible in terms of withdrawals and what we're going to spend, and we could always find some very part-time work to make some money if we really wanted to. But
yeah, a couple lawyers with engineering degree. Yeah, I think you guys could probably find something if you had to.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, even working at Home Depot or somewhere, a little bit would pay the bills. But I haven't had a problem so far finding some very, very part-time opportunities to make a few bucks here and there. So I think if I really wanted to, I could probably make enough to live on just doing some freelancing.
Yeah. How did you decide on the 2-year cash reserve? Was it just what felt right and comfortable, or was there some math behind the decision?
There's not really a lot of math other than just kind of knowing the rough history of the markets, that a whole lot of the downturns are only about a year, 2 years long. If you look back, you'll see every once in a while, you'll see periods where the markets are down 3 years in a row in the negative. But even the Great Recession of 08, 09, it was, I believe there were 2 down years there. And by the time 09 came around, that year ended up on a positive. So I think we were in recession for 18 months then, maybe 21 months. But, maybe it lasted longer than that. Anyway, the market recovered after a few years. So
where do you keep your cash?
It's actually at our credit union that pays 1% right now. So I'm still kind of easing into things, and I haven't found a better short-term storage place, but it's paying it. I think at 1% is pretty competitive compared to a lot of the banks around.
So as you were, saving money and thinking about retiring early, did you have some method to calculate what you would need before you felt comfortable retiring at such a young age?
Yeah, I use the 4% rule just in general terms, and that was more of a guiding practice or guiding principle than an exact number, exact science. And I actually adjusted it down below 4% just to adjust for the fact that I'm, once I started accumulating a lot of money, I figured out, hey, I'm probably going to be in my 30s when I'm able to retire early. So I said, well, somewhere around 3%, 3.25%, that's probably about where I'm comfortable with the trade-off of risk and likelihood of being able to have that money last forever.
Mm-hmm. So with 4%, you just took your annual expenses and multiplied by 25?
Yeah, that was, I ended up, once I got closer, I started dividing by 3.25%. Okay. So it's roughly 33 times what I needed each year. So if I needed $30,000 a year, that would equate to about $1 million in assets.
Was there any point along your journey where there were sacrifices that you had to make that were really painful? You really wanted something, or you wanted to do something, you just decided, I can't, if I want to retire early, I've got to forego this?
I don't recall any really painful sacrifices. There were, obviously you have to be mindful of your spending. Otherwise I guess if I was totally oblivious to it, I would just spend everything and never have anything to save. But I don't really view them as sacrifices at all. I mean, we made small changes here and there just to get by on the cheap and not spend a ton of money. But things like a bigger house or a new car, I never really cared that much about. So I think my wife wanted a new car for a while, but she sort of realized that if you spend money on a new car, it means you have to work X months or X years longer to pay for that. And we'll spend money on maintaining the car so that it runs properly and so that it's not going to break down on the side of the road. It is, as long as it's functional, just the car as an example, as long as the car is functional and runs properly and you're not going to be stranded, that's, it's serving the purpose of what a car should do. And then it's nice to not have to take care of a really nice car and worry if somebody dings it or bumps into it or scratches it. Hey, it's just another ding. It's not a huge deal.
Right. So do you guys own a home?
Yeah, we own a home here in Raleigh.
So how'd that happen?
We actually, I found a good deal on a house that was being auctioned by the city as surplus property. And so we bought it, maybe about $20,000 or $30,000 below market value. It needed a little bit of work, but it wasn't a foreclosure. It was just a utility project related acquisition, and then the city got rid of it. So we bought it and moved in a little bit over 11 years ago, and it's probably 2/3 of the value of the median house price here in Raleigh. So it's a little bit cheap. It's in a relatively affordable neighborhood. That's part of our ability to retire early. A lot of our peers where we worked ended up moving to fancier neighborhoods as they got wealthier. Well, as they increased their income, I should say. They took that income and they qualified for bigger mortgages, and so they ended up moving out to the nicer, brand new neighborhoods and buying bigger houses. But
well, so how did you find out about this? I mean, you said it was surplus property. If someone else wanted to try to do what you've done, how would they go about trying to find these kinds of auctions where they live?
They have a website for our city of Raleigh, and I know I've seen other cities that have it as well. I know our city has vacant lots and some small houses for sale from time to time. Sometimes they have big problems, and sometimes they're just, they acquired the house just to build a road in front of it or do something in front of it, and it was cheaper to buy the house than to pay the homeowner damages or whatever if they're trying to take some of their property.
Right.
So that's sort of what we did. I mean, the house, it has sewer easements on either side, and they had to dig those up. And instead of trying to deal with the homeowner while they're there and relocate them and everything, they just bought the house from the lady. They bought the house for $145,000, and we bought it for $110,000 from the city. So they took a big loss on the house themselves, but for them it was cheaper to do that than to deal with a big construction project and an angry homeowner.
Right.
So I would check out websites for the cities. And I actually worked for the city for a while, so I went and talked to some of the people there and got the backstory on the property, and they were pretty open about it. I think even if I was a member of the public, they probably would have told me about the property, and they came out and they showed it to me and walked me through the bidding process and everything. So it was a relatively easy process.
How did you finance it?
When we first bought it, we had a little over half the purchase price in cash, just from saving money during college. We started a small business when I was still in law school that made a decent amount of profit. So we paid about the whole thing was paid for in cash, but I want to say about a third of it was money I'd borrowed from my parents for about 6 months, just until I could refinance it into my own mortgage. But the other 2/3 roughly was money that we had on hand.
What business did you start in law school?
It was a data collection business in the engineering field, and it's very very labor intensive, and so we ended up just slowly growing over time. We didn't do a whole lot of work, but we got really lucky and landed a $42,000 contract. Right before I finished law school, the year before I finished law school, we landed this huge contract. And so I was working 16 hours a day for about 5 weeks, and we had about 12 or 13 people on staff, temporary staff. But
while you're in law school?
Yeah. Right.
I'm a slacker compared to you. I mean, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, well, that's the opportunity sort of fell in our lap, but it was we had done good work for this client before, and so they said, okay, well, here's a huge job for you, and we were cheaper than the competitor because I was just a law school student.
A couple of kids in college.
Yeah. I mean, we had virtually no overhead costs, and I think we made $32,000 profit on that $42,000 job just because of our very low cost structure.
So when you left law school, did you just dissolve the business? Did you sell it? Do you still have it?
Yeah, I dissolved it. I tried to sell it as an ongoing business, and I just couldn't find any buyers. So I ended up starting to work for an engineering company, and it would have been a conflict of interest to keep that business because they were in the same line of business. So I ended up selling my equipment to the company I worked for a few $1,000s. But
Okay, so you paid cash. Or a large part of it, of the home in cash. Through your parents, you refinanced some of it. You had some of that cash came from the business that you just described you had in law school. Today, you said you've got about 1.4 million invested. When you started working after law school, you had student loans, but was your investment accounts at zero? I mean, you had this money from the business you used to buy the house, but other than that, were you starting from zero? And in the span of what, 11, 12 years, you've gotten from zero to 1.4 million?
Yeah, it was roughly zero. With the house, like I mentioned, we bought it for a couple of $10,000 under the roughly fair market value for it. And so I ended up doing a cash out refinance back in maybe around '04, '05, and took probably $50,000 or $60,000 of equity out of the house. And I mean, some of that was money that we had put in ourselves from our business. So it wasn't like we were truly doing like a cash out refinance. It was sort of cashing back out our own cash we put in. But anyway, I got the cash out refinance from the bank and put that money in the market back in '04, '05. And so we started back then with maybe 50,000. We may have had a little bit from savings. I think I'd done IRA contributions even when I was in college. So we might have had 50 or 75,000 right when we were starting out.
Did '08 and '09 scare you?
Not in terms of investments. I actually was secretly relishing the opportunity to buy all this stuff for half off or more. I even changed my asset allocation to get a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more risky during '08.
How do you get more risky than 100% stocks?
Well, I switched it up a little bit and tried to get more international small caps, some international real estate, and more emerging markets, and some of that was just the availability of exchange traded funds to easily implement that strategy. But it was also realizing that long term, I'm comfortable with taking small risks on a bunch of different sectors that will hopefully not all go down at the same time. Right. So I moved into those, I think, in November of '08. So it wasn't quite at the very bottom. So I missed the bottom by a few months, but the opportunity to purchase things at half off or more was just incredible. The only fear I had was our company laid off close to half their people. I survived all the cuts and everything, but it was just a really tough time in our industry back then. So my fear was more of losing my job and losing my ability to keep buying all these new assets at half off. Not really, like I said, we live off of one income or less. So as long as one of us have a job, we would be totally fine from a cash flow standpoint. It'd just be that missed opportunity of not being able to save. But I just kept maxing out everything, putting everything I could into the market. And I knew at the time this was going to be the buying opportunity of a lifetime for me. And so I just kept dumping money in the market.
Right. Well, it was a great opportunity, that's for sure. So do you credit your parents? I mean, like you seem to have had from a very young age a pretty good head on your shoulders when it comes to money. I mean, how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my parents, growing up, we never really didn't waste a lot of money. It was comfortably middle class growing up. We had actually the house I grew up in is almost identical to the house I live in now here. They live on the other side of town in Cary, but I'm 20 minutes away. So being comfortable living in not living in a mansion, not having luxury cars and maids and going on skiing trips all the time. And, I pretty much live how I lived growing up. And I don't, so I'm sure that's that mentality or frame of reference of what is normal probably shaped what I ended up growing up and being comfortable with later in life.
Yeah. Well, tell us about your website. So you started Root of Good. Why did you start it, and tell us what folks can learn if they head to your blog?
Sure. Right after I decided I was retired, I said, "What am I going to do all day?" And I've always wanted to do something on the internet or start writing, start a blog, start a website. So I just sat down one weekend and started Googling how to blog, how to set up a blog, that sort of thing. And I got into it and I figured out, well, okay, it's not that hard to do. So I just figured out a name. Probably finding the name was the hardest part, but got my domain name, set up everything, and started typing away. Not really knowing how to do it for sure, but I figured other people have done it, so I can do it too. And there's YouTube videos out there to help you get set up on the technical side. So, and I just did it on a whim, more or less, hoping I could set it up and maybe get enough Google AdSense revenue to cover my blog hosting, my website hosting costs, and that worked out pretty well. In terms of what you can learn, I talk about a lot of early retirement topics, the financial side as well as the psychosocial side. So the psychology of how do you deal with people and tell them that you're wealthy or not tell them you're wealthy. I put out an article recently on do you hide your wealth? Do you tell people that you're early retired, or do I say, hey, I'm just a stay-at-home dad? And there aren't a lot of people out there that are very young but have money to live off of comfortably and be financially independent. So you're sort of in a weird place, and you don't really want to create weirdness around you. So I explore some of those ideas. I've got a bunch of articles on there about taxes, some about investments, money management in general. I don't really have any great frugality stories, but I do share all my expenses on there each month, and a lot of people seem to like that, to see opportunities for savings without really slashing their lifestyle a whole lot.
Right.
So I've got some good feedback from those sort of articles. Yeah.
Have you had friends or family that have given you a hard time, or you feel a weird vibe from them because you're retired at such a young age?
No, not that I can think of. I mean, there may be some unsaid things that I'm just not picking up on, but in general, everybody's been pretty happy and supportive. And it comes down to, I guess, if I had friends that would have been jealous about it, then are they really your friends? So, and I'm pretty open about, I don't have to work anymore, but it just doesn't come up a lot in conversation with most friends. I mean, it's just sort of, hey, that's just who we are, but we can still hang out and drink beer and play games or whatever. But
right.
Yeah.
So why did you retire before your wife?
I actually got let go from the company I was, or the government job. So that was, we were close enough where I was like, okay, well, I guess that's it. I'm done. And she's been hanging on. She has a lot of time off, so her schedule's fairly flexible and lets us still do the traveling we wanted to do. And she's just sort of reaching the end of all the extra benefits and time off. So it's just a matter of, depending on what she's able to get in terms of time off in the next few months, she may go sooner rather than later.
Right. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. I have one last question for you,
Sure.
If you will, but just before I let you go. As you kind of have been on your journey, have there been any books, investing, personal finance, anything that stands out that you've read that you felt really helped you achieve what you've done, retiring so early?
Yeah, there's a few books. Probably the best one, the one I refer everyone to when they ask about investing, the Boglehead's, I think it's the Boglehead's Common Sense Guide to Investing.
Right.
That one's really good, and they've updated it recently. It's very accessible to an entry-level person.
Yeah, it's a great one.
That one's probably the best one, just for the pure finances and getting your mind wrapped around the concept of efficient financial lifestyle in terms of saving money, insurance, taxes, investments, everything. So that's probably the top one. I've read a bunch of William Bernstein's books that are more in-depth on investing. And I started reading the Your Money or Your Life book. I think it's pretty dated and has a lot of outdated financial advice. And I don't think I finished the book, and I don't recall why exactly, but that's another good one, I think, in terms of learning about the trade-off between what you're earning and what you actually want to get out of life, and kind of equating your paycheck to time. You're trading your life in exchange for money, and when do you want to stop doing that?
Yeah, it is a good one. Its chapters on investing are not good at all.
Yeah, I think that's where I dropped it, I think, when
Yeah.
they started talking about treasury bonds or something.
Right. But yeah, really good in terms of the value of your time and what's most important to you. So yeah, those are all good ones. Well, I appreciate it. Well, listen, I wish you the best. It's great to hear your story. The thing I like about your story too is not only can it help people that might want to retire early, but it can also help people who are beyond retiring early. They've just started too late. But, you've shown that you can do it in 10 years.
Yeah.
So if someone's 50 and they're worried about retiring at 65, well, it's not too late. You've got time, and you can learn a lot from the early retirees, So I think that's terrific.
Yeah, and by the time they're 50, usually your earnings are a lot higher than a 20-something's earnings would be. So really, you could probably turbocharge your savings even more by the time you're 50. And you may have the kids out of the house already, so you don't even have to pay for the kids anymore.
Well, I'm 48. We've got our kids out of the house, so I can speak to that. So yeah, absolutely. And it does, not having your son take 45-minute showers and eat all the food in the house definitely reduces the monthly cost. There's no doubt about it. So
yeah.
All right, Justin. Well, listen, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, no problem, Rob. Thanks a lot.
So during the interview with Justin, and then as I reflected on it in the days following that interview, I actually interviewed him about 2 weeks ago, actually, and then I'm now just preparing this interview to be published. I reflected back on Mr. Money Mustache and thought about others that have retired at a very early or young age. And, a couple of things that struck me. The first is that, what they're doing is not complicated. There's no complicated hoops to jump through. That doesn't mean it's necessarily easy, but it's not complicated. And if you look at the folks that have retired early, and of course, we're not talking to folks that inherited money. We're not talking to folks that won the lottery or that were one of the first employees at Facebook and cashed in stock options for millions of dollars. We're talking about folks that basically do just a couple of things. One is they save a large portion of their income. I would say the folks I've talked to tend to save 50% or more. And if you're sort of in middle age, like I am, I guess maybe that's a compliment. Maybe I'm beyond middle age. I'm not sure, but you've made life choices that have kind of locked you into a certain trajectory. You have the 2 cars, and you have the children, and you have the house, and you have this sort of lifestyle and this circle of friends. And it's the kind of sort of American, quote unquote, American dream where you save 5 or 10% of your income, maybe 15%. And what you've done is we've bought into all of these things that put us on a track to do what most people do: work until we're 65 or 70 before we can retire. And the one thing that folks like Justin has done, and what Mr. Money Mustache has done, is they rejected that. It's not that they don't live in a tent. It's not that extreme. They live in perfectly nice homes, but they drive used cars. Typically, they drive them for a decade or more. They don't buy into a large amount of consumerism. That's not to say they don't enjoy things, but it's in moderation. And it allows them to save a significant chunk of their income. And then they simply invest it typically in low-cost index funds. That's what I've seen as I've talked to not only Justin today, but others in the past that, and some other folks that I'll have on the show here in the future as well. They tend, by and large, to stick to low-cost index funds to save their money, and they take advantage of the tax advantaged retirement accounts. So they'll take advantage of 401ks and matching contributions. They'll take advantage of IRAs, HSAs. So they'll certainly take advantage of the tax benefits that they can from these types of accounts. Invest in low index or low cost index funds, and save a pretty significant a portion of their income. And that's it. That's what they do. It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. Again, depending on where you are in your life and your journey, it may or may not be easy. It's one of the things I'm trying to convince my children of, because they're not yet at that point where they've they don't have debt, they're not married, they don't have children, they don't own a home, they have options in front of them, all kinds of choices that they can make. And I'm trying to encourage them to start saving a significant percentage of their income now. Because if you do that starting out, it's much easier than, if you're in your 30s or 40s or older and you're trying to make a big change to your life. You can do it, of course. It's just easier if you do it right out of the gate, which is exactly what Justin did, as you heard, and what Mr. Money Mustache did, and what I'm trying to convince my children to do. The other thing that struck me about the interview with Justin is that, the things that we can learn from him, even if we don't choose to retire early, or perhaps, if you're like me, you're kind of beyond retiring early, right? At least retiring at age 33. But for those late savers, those baby boomers who have sort of gotten behind in retirement saving, for whatever reason, we can learn a lot from these folks that managed to retire in 10 or 15 years of work. So if you're 50 and you're really just starting to save for retirement, it's so easy to get discouraged. It's so easy to regret maybe past decisions that were made. The fact that you didn't get started in your 20s or 30s. It's sort of easy to focus on that and to focus on what could have been if you'd started saving earlier. But of course, those sorts of thoughts and feelings don't help us, right? They don't help us reach our goals. But we can take what the early retirees do and learn from them. And so if you're 50, and I'm just picking that number, you may be older or younger, but if you're 50, you absolutely can retire at age 65. That's 15 years of saving. Now, it's going to take some effort, and it may take some changes in how you spend your money, how you save your money. But we can look at folks like Justin, see how he retired at 33, and then apply those principles, the things we learned, to our own lives, even if we're not going to follow in his footsteps and retire at such a young age. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the interview with Justin. Please check out his blog, Root of Good. In fact, I was looking at it just today, and we're in March 2015, and he just published his February 2015 financial update. And it's kind of fun to read. He walks through his income for the month from investing in other things. He walks through his expenses, his total expenses for February 2015, $903. He walks through it all. It shows you where they spend their money, all the numbers. So definitely check out his blog if you haven't already, rootofgood.com. Hey, hope you have a great day. And remember, until next time, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.